Yes.
So many people thought it was absolutely impossible for a black man to be president of the United States.
That's right.
My own family, and I told my brother and sister, I said, if you want to see a black man president in our time, Babs, we thought you knew something about politics. Are you crazy? America's not going to vote for a black man. And they didn't. It took me from 2005 or 2006 all the way up to almost the beginning of 2008 to bring them on board. And they always sort of thought, well, Barb knows what's going on in politics. We sort of follow her guide. But she's lost it this time. So there was more to it than that. And then there was the jealousy because of his age, because others like Jesse Jackson had been around for years. And then who is this Obama? No way. They just were not going to have it. Oh, yeah, the orator,
silver voice.
Al Sharpton, you know, the old guard. It's like, we're not having this.
But what do you think Obama's presidency ended up meaning for African Americans, aside from the symbolism of his having made it?
It took the American black male a presidency, you know, a full term, the first 4 years before they came on board. There were a lot more black American males that came out his second term than came out the first time. So it took them a while. Now that he's gone, they miss him. While he was there, they were surprised, but I don't think they paid enough attention soon enough. The support was not really behind him during his presidency. It's there now in sorrow. On the greater stage of America, I believe that Obama, as much as he was a gentleman and a man that got on well with other nations and well domestically and internationally on a professional and charismatic plane, because we've never had more charismatic presidents than Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. But Obama did not accomplish very much as president. So his legacy is not going to be deep, unfortunately.
Now, before we address that, I just wanted you to, Maureen, to tell us the story about your constructive feedback for Barack Obama.
So, anyway, I was doing what, for me, was gushing coverage of Obama, but I would occasionally tweak him because he was a little finicky. And when he was campaigning in the states like Pennsylvania with lots of working class people, he'd have to go to bars, and he was supposed to drink a beer and eat cheesesteaks and things, and he didn't like to do that, so he'd take one sip and pass it to his body man. And then with cheesesteaks, I don't even think he took a bite. You know, he was so skinny. It was like
where's
those
the sushi?
Yeah, those actresses. No, it was trail mix. Those actresses who think an Altoid is a 3-course meal. But anyway, that was just a tiny little tweaking by me. So then he was going to get some foreign policy experience, and he went to Berlin and Paris, and we were on the plane with him, and all the reporters from major newspapers were going to get 15-minute interviews, and I went up to do my interview, and he turned to his aides and he said, can you please leave? I want to be alone with Maureen. And I was so excited because I thought, oh, it's not just going to be the old white guy columnist anymore. I'm going to be the new Scotty Reston. He's going to give me a big scoop, and we're going to have this amazing columnist president relationship. And so I'm sitting there all excited, and he looks at me and he goes, "You are really irritating." And I was so dashed. Everything was dashed for me at that moment. And then he repeated it again. And he said, "You set the zeitgeist, and I don't like the zeitgeist you're setting because you make me seem too," you know, he said that I'm eating salads and, you know, and going the whole thing. Yes. No, that was actually another Chicago thing. I might have popularized it. But anyway, yes. So I said, "But you do those things." And he goes, "You know, but it doesn't seem cool." He was very obsessed with seeming cool, which was funny because he was cool.
Mm-hmm. Chas, when we think about like all the various kind of peccadillos and curiosities, eccentricities, foibles, weaknesses, whatever, all the flaws of leaders, past and present, which of those characteristics actually matter?
for
Great leadership.
from a positive point of view, something
Yeah.
that's positive. Okay, I think that the rarest characteristic in a leader, which is the most valuable one, is restraint. Because I think that is, especially when you're the president, you're a very powerful person and you can get a lot of stuff done and you can buy your own hype. And I feel like it's interesting what Maureen was saying before about sometimes people react to that and then you get, after that, someone who's got no restraint at all.
Sometimes it's like romance, you know, you're just going to the opposite.
that's true.
But I feel like especially the executive in America is becoming way too powerful, like over time. And I feel like if you don't practice restraint, there is an inbuilt backlash to you and revenge from the other side, and it just gets worse. And I feel like America's locked in a cycle where things are escalating all the time. And the sooner they get a president after Trump or whatever who practices genuine restraint and actually diminishes their powers, I think that the better it will be, because I'm worried about where America's going otherwise.
Are you worried about the fragility of the democracy there?
I'm not worried about the fragility of democracy. I'm worried about, although I think in the long run, maybe, I'm more worried about the fact that America is becoming ungovernable. Like, I think you can still have a democracy that's a mess. And I'm worried that they're facing perpetual gridlock, which is only going to be leavened by breaking norms, which will then create escalations from the other side. And you'll get a situation somewhere down the track where Supreme Court, people just stop listening to it. Or the people who lose an election just don't accept it. Like that could have happened in the last election.
Of what's going on right now?
Yeah, and it could get worse, and I'm worried about that.
Yeah.
Because earlier this year, our guest Maureen Dowd published an interview with Hollywood actor Uma Thurman. Now, in the wake of the Me Too movement, Thurman had indicated she had something to say.
When I've spoken in anger, I usually regret the way I express myself. So I've been waiting to feel less angry. And when I'm ready, I'll say what I have to say.
And then suddenly she was ready. And she spoke to Maureen Dowd. And in this interview, she revealed she'd been subjected to unwanted and forceful advances from former Miramax head Harvey Weinstein. She also tells a chilling story from the set of the Kill Bill films, and a warning: the footage you're about to see depicts a violent crash. Now, Thurman stated she was pressured by director Quentin Tarantino into performing a scene in which she drove a car at high speed. Despite expressing reservations about her safety, she relented and was subsequently injured, as you've just seen, when the car crashed. Now, I know this was a very complicated story to report on. It involved, you know, sustained investigation, especially her relationship with Quentin Tarantino. Why was this story significant?
Well, she had stories about Harvey Weinstein, you know, trying to come on to her and retaliate against her. But her more intense story was about Quentin Tarantino. They were the most famous auteur-muse relationship since Alfred Hitchcock and Ingrid Bergman. And she felt that he was in love with her, and she felt he put her in this situation of the car crash and put her life in danger. And he gave the stunt drivers the day off. He lied to them and told them there was no stunt going on. And he told her that the path was straight when it was curved. And she was worried about the car, that it had been retrofitted with a stick shift. And
Right, and he assured her and said, I've
Yes.
driven down that before, and all you
Right.
have to do is go straight and fast, because I
Right.
want your hair to whip around at the back.
Right, and she felt he put her in a death box, and so she spent, I think, 15 years trying to get that footage out of him. And in a way, I mean, I think it's analogous to when Alfred Hitchcock was in love with Tippi Hedren, and he, you know, had a scene where the birds, real birds, were eating at her, and he was angry that she had rejected him. And so, you know, he let the scene go on to the point of incredible masochism, or rather sadism, sorry. And, you know, it's a little bit like that. Like, Uma Thurman told me that in the Kill Bill scene where an actor spits on her, actually Quentin did the honors himself. And in another scene where a girl strangles her with a Japanese kind of weapon, he did that to her. And so
he insisted, he inserted himself into the scenes.
Yes, he did it, and then, cut in the movie. It was the actor. But so at 3 o'clock one morning, I'm interviewing her in her apartment because she was in a play, so our interviews would start late, and she started crying, and she said it had taken her 47 years to realize that when someone says they love you, but they're cruel to you, that's not love. And she just felt like she had gone through a lot for him, but it was a step too far to put her life in danger.
And what's happened since she told her story?
Well, Quentin Tarantino, a few days later, gave an interview and admitted everything and said he felt horrible about it. And, his career is going on. He did not get drummed out because it wasn't, it was a sexual thing, but in such an oblique way. And now he's making a movie about Charles Manson and Sharon Tate, and every big star in Hollywood is in it. So,
right, and of course the charge, Barbara, has been from the beginning really important stories about powerful figures. But is it isolated to just particular industries? When Tanara Burke actually started the Me Too movement 10 years ago, particularly about black women and women of colour and the sexual assault and rapes they'd experienced. Are the consequences of the telling of these stories going to be confined, or do you think they will spread further?
Oh, they'll clearly spread further. It's interesting, when Weinstein came out, I started thinking myself, how many times have I been molested? Because I was not only the only woman in the room when I first got into corporate American life, but I was the only woman of color. And so I jotted down a few things right away after watching a program one night, 5 or 6 details, and I kept waking up at night before I went to sleep. By the next morning, I had about 15 different isolated incidents that had happened or near things. Fortunately, I was one that would go and say, try to cut it off right away before anything horrible happened, for the most part. But I actually, as a communication trainer and coach, I have done some training on the Me Too stuff, and I did a class, and it was supposed to be a one session. It was going to be 2 hours, and the women were so inspired, and I gave them that same exercise. I said, take 5 minutes and just write down the number of instances that you have had where you've had a situation with a man and you felt threatened sexually or somehow molested. And they asked me to come back the next day. They wanted a second session. They hadn't finished yet. So it happens across the board and in every instance. But as I think one of the points you wanted to bring out tonight was what happens when it's the reverse, when women are actually molesting men.
With Asia Argento, who was one of the prominent advocates and storytellers, and she accused Harvey Weinstein at Cannes of raping her, and now it turns out there's allegations against her. How much does this change things?
Well, I grew up on film noir, so of course we know that the female can be as deadly as the male, and women can have the same range of vices. But it just because it happens more seldom. I think it's a good course correction, because up until now it was like all women were believed on everything and all men were not believed and shoved through the trapdoor. And there was an unpleasant sort of Colosseum aspect to it, the cheering, the rooting on for men to lose everything. And of course, monsters like Harvey do deserve to lose everything. But then there were some other men whose sins were not quite at that level and who also have lost everything. And I just think we have to have more due process.
And just quickly, do you think that Bill Clinton would have had a different experience were he president post Me Too?
Well, it's very interesting, because you can't imagine James Carville using the same tactics on Stormy Daniels that he used with Jennifer Flowers and Paula Jones, calling them trailer trash and, smearing them that way. Stormy Daniels is treated as a respected businesswoman.
But the sad part about that story is that Hillary Clinton also trashed the women, not her husband, Let's tell the truth here.
Maureen has written about that many times.
Yes.
I was just going to say, I feel like what's happened, to take into consideration the Asia Argento story, etc., is that the power dynamics were calcified until quite recently, until about 5 to 10 years ago, and now they've been shaken up, and we don't know what the new rules are. And while this is happening, people are questioning the abuse of power, full stop, across the board. And that's good. That's a good process. And hopefully when the power dynamics calcify again, they'll calcify in a much more equitable way.
I'm so sorry, Greg, but we're going to leave on the equitable calcification.
Sorry, I took your time.
That is all we have time for. Thanks so much to all of our panel, Chas Licciardello, Maureen Dowd.